Okay, hello everybody. I'm starting out this YouTube channel. I'm just going to talk about my experience with cars first off and what I've done. And so basically I'm going to break this into two different eras, with the first era being with my first car, a gold Pontiac G6, and that was for about 4 years. And then we're going to go into sort of the second era, which we're in now, where I've really expanded what I've been doing. I've been working on more stuff. I've gotten this Prius here that I've been driving and another car over there. And so I'm just going to go through and say, kind of what I've done. And so the first era, as I said, was the gold Pontiac G6. And so I got that as my first car for my senior year of high school, and I really do love the car. I don't currently daily drive it. It's actually in storage right now. But that's where I first started doing some of these automotive related type projects. And so the first thing, right when I first got it, within a couple months, was I replaced the rear speakers since they had blown out. And I wasn't doing any type of like crazy power or anything, just the stock radio setup, the stock, all the power levels and stuff, they just wore out and were crappy. And so that was one of the first things I did. And then later on, I'd also go to replace the front speakers as well, which required taking apart the door panels, but that wasn't too hard of a job. And so then one of the next things that I did was putting a backup camera in the car, a hardwired one, because back then they didn't have the cool options we have now with the wireless ones and stuff like that, about 5 years ago. And so getting that wired up, and then the first time I did it, I had the dealership put in the final bit of wiring up through the dash for the screen. But then a couple years later, the screen died because it's just, these cheap little screens. And so then I had to take apart the dash, and I did that myself to replace the screen. And so that was some good experience. And then maybe 2 years into it, I put on a trailer hitch, which was definitely a piece of work to do that alone. Just had two of the jacks that you use, like that you have in the trunk, the little emergency jacks. So I was holding it up on each side when I was putting on the hitch to drill the holes, since it was the type where you drill holes and then you put a plate through the section of the frame and then you bolt it on. So it wasn't a weld-on one. And so none of these things that I've said so far are really very difficult or complicated or anything like that. And so then I get into some of the cosmetic things. Is a common issue with these Pontiac G6s, if you've ever seen them in the rust belt sort of area, is the rocker panels, down here, rust out on like basically every one I see in Iowa is they're rusted out. That's just how they all are. And so I started to see some rust coming in, and with some good advice from a relative of mine who works at a body shop and does painting professionally, I took some of his advice, and I took off the plastic piece and I sanded it down. I put some Bondo in, primed, painted, and clear coated it. And I'm not going to say it looks super. It doesn't look the same as the factory paint looks, but I think it looked good, and it was better than rust, letting the rust just grow in how it was going to happen naturally. And so that was my first really big project that I did. And then I got it after the rust restoration. There were a couple of other things that I started looking into, it was starting, at that time it had been, after 3 or 4 years of owning it, and I had gotten it in 2015, and it's a 2007, so it was starting to show its age and stuff. It was getting the really foggy headlights, and I mentioned the rust, but and the rims weren't looking very good. They just had a lot of how the rotors, when they rust and then the rust water drips down, it sort of coats the inside of the silver with sort of a brown color that's like baked on, if you've experienced that at all with alloy rims. And so I kind of set out to make it look a little bit nicer, a little fresher. And so I took the headlights off and I restored them. And the reason I had them out was I was fixing it ended up being one of the sockets, the little plug part went bad. So I soldered in a new one of those. But I restored the headlights, and then I got into what I've kind of become sort of known for with friends of mine is my obsession with getting my rims clean. And these rims I've not actually cleaned because they're so new and they're still pretty good, but I took off the rims, all 4 wheels on the G6, and I went through and I cleaned them. And I might make future videos talking about rims and the cleaning process that I do, but I cleaned them up, I touched them up, and they ended up looking really nice. And then kind of one of the last things I did with the G6 was painting up the little metal front grille pieces. And so now we're kind of getting into the second era of me working on cars, to where I came into driving this Prius V as my daily driver rather than the Pontiac G6, and then getting into some of the things I've done with it. And then just very recently I just got a '04 Corolla manual that I've been having a lot of fun with, some things to do with that, got a good deal on. And so let's head inside and talk about some of that other stuff, because it's cold out here. It's winter in Iowa. It's pretty cold. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about the second era, so to speak, of my working with cars, which pretty much lines up with me getting the Prius V as my vehicle that I use as my daily driver. And then it also happens to coincide with me finishing college, which I did this spring. Sorry, this is spring, sort of, almost. So 2020, spring of 2020, I finished in mechanical engineering from Iowa State. And so then after that, you know, Corona situation going on, not much work going on. So I had a lot more time to work on cars and, you know, learn more about them. And so some of the big things that helped a lot with this rapid, you know, other than the time factor, was I got a scan tool for Christmas last year. The Blue Driver is what I use currently. But, you know, there's plenty, I don't want to necessarily endorse them, but that's just what I happen to get. And that really opens up so much more. You know, you can't, I couldn't imagine you guys have been working on cars from the before OBD2 era, because you actually had to know what you were doing to really figure things out, because without the scan tool I'd be pretty lost a lot of the times. So anyways, so I'm driving the Prius V, and it's pretty high mileage. You know, it's right now sitting at about 220K, and so that's fairly high mileage, but it's a 2015, so it's not very old, and so it has all the nice features that my G6 didn't have, like Bluetooth and stuff like that. And it's also basically a wagon, so it has a lot of storage space. And so I was driving it, and I wasn't having any issues at first, and then I did my first brake job on the Prius. And so I had taken the wheels off the Pontiac G6, and so then I was then doing the brakes on the Prius. And so it's kind of a progression of how I was learning things, in the sense of, you know, you'd start out with getting a jack and lifting it, you know, and then you would go to taking the wheel off. And then once you have the wheel off, it's sort of like little steps. And then you start to learn that these things that seem really scary to do, seem really hard to do, like doing brakes. You know, most people would think, oh, I don't want to touch that because if I screw up, it'll kill me, or something like that. But you just start doing little steps. And if you have the time and you don't mind learning, pretty much you figure out that, oh, it's actually really simple. You know, brakes are a super simple job to do. And so I did that, and that really boosted my confidence of actually doing some of these more mechanic sort of jobs. And so then maybe 6 months after I was driving the Prius a lot, I started having the what I found out to be the dreaded misfire codes started coming, and on cold startup the engine would misfire and stutter really bad. And so I do some research on the Prius chat forums, and that's one of the greatest things as well, is the internet, being able to look up these problems. Another thing that would have been so hard before the modern day would be trying to diagnose things without, you know, thousands of people online that have already had this same issue and that have documented different things that might cause it. And having, you know, those resources of the forums is really a great thing. And so at first I go through and I try doing some of the more basic things, like swapping the coils and cleaning the EGR system, which I will say that if you are having this issue with your Prius, you know, it ended up for me being the head gasket going out, which that's so far to date, the biggest job I've done has been the head gasket replacement on the Prius. And so I did that a couple months ago, and that was a big job. And, you know, but after I got that done, it really boosted my confidence to where I'm actually willing to make videos about some of the stuff I've been working on. And so anyways, if you do have a Prius and you're having this issue, pretty much, I mean, the guys on the forums kind of misled me into thinking it could be all these little things. I don't know what they were on, but no, it was the head gasket just slowly going. And so, you know, you can't ignore a problem. That's definitely the biggest thing that I've found out, is you can't let your ego or pride or anything get in the way. You know, you can't think, oh, this is my car, it's so great, it can't be having this issue, because, man, the facts are, if it's doing it, you know, you just got to fix it, or you got to find out something else to do. So anyways, and so then I did a full brake job, front and rear, on the Pontiac G6 not long after doing some of these other things as well. And that was right before it went to storage. And so then I got the Corolla because wanted to have a manual of my own ever since high school, when I had friends who let me. Luckily, I had friends that would let me drive their manuals, and it was a lot of fun. But that was only, you know, maybe for an hour or two 5 years ago, right? So I really wanted to get a manual of my own that I could drive. And I've had motorcycles since high school as well, and they're manuals, but I wanted a manual car. And so I just picked up this Corolla 2004, and it needed a little bit of work, but now that I felt really confident from, you know, I've learned about using scan tools, I've done some brake jobs, I've done the head gasket, and I feel like I kind of know what's going on. I've been watching a lot more content from other people, and so I get the Corolla, and all it really needed was an oxygen sensor, and then I also used a hack, which I might make a future video on, about how to space out the downstream oxygen sensor so that you can get rid of inefficient cat code rather than replacing your cat, which is you know, really expensive. And so then it also needed struts, so I ended up in the rear, the Corolla, so I put on some quick struts because that was a really easy job, and I didn't have to actually compress the springs or anything. And so that sort of gets us to where we are now, which is my most recent project has been getting some different rims for the Corolla and learning all about wheels and all the different specs that wheels have. And kind of why I wanted to make this channel is I've been doing these projects, and when I did the head gasket on the Prius, I was watching other YouTubers who had made videos of the steps to go through, and I was thinking about it, and you know, that helped me a lot. And so I'm thinking maybe if I make some videos of my own on these interesting topics, not super generic stuff, you know, there's 10 million videos on brake jobs, you know, you just go watch Chris Fix or something if you want that, but something that maybe isn't out there yet, like to figure out, like what I had to do, because I didn't find any videos on it, was making VW rims fit on a Toyota, and what the different things are that you need to consider aside from just the basic bolt pattern, but also all the other specs you have to consider. And then maybe get into some how I've been using 3D printing to assist me with some of these projects. And that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about in the future, hopefully. And so, yeah, that's the end of this video. And I think I said probably 50 times, so hopefully it's not too bad. And I'll see you later. Working on cars and stuff like that, which coincides pretty well with Ruby at the door.